This is Gamble Quest, where we discuss all things gambling, poker, blackjack, roulette, dice. It doesn't matter. If you're gambling on it, we discussing it. Let's go on this journey together as we educate ourselves on the gambling world. What's up, everybody? This is Emmanuel at Gamble Quest. Gamble Quest is a podcast and YouTube channel. And today we're going to be interviewing Jeff. He's a professional dealer, and we're going to get into his story, how he started dealing, and we're just going to talk a little bit about the industry that he's in. So, how you doing today, Jeff?
Doing well, man. How about you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited about our conversation we're about to have, man. Although I played poker till 5 in the morning last night at Hard Rock, I said, man, I can't miss this opportunity because I've been wanting to interview a poker dealer, and I wanted to get into the backstory of that. But my first question is, Jeff, how did you get involved? Well, first of all, where you from, and how did you get involved with becoming a poker dealer?
So I'm originally from the Brandon Riverview area of
Okay.
Florida. Um, how I became a dealer is actually directly related to gambling, believe it or not.
Okay.
So I'll try to sum it up as quick as possible. But basically, my dad played cards for years and years. Kind of passed it on to me when I was a little kid,
Okay.
and eventually we got to the point where I went to college at Florida State, and one of my really close friends was the president of the FSU's poker club. I was like, "Oh, I played as a kid, so I
Hmm.
joined the club, play little $10 tournaments on Fridays." One day, one of the local dealers advertised in our Facebook group that we were basically he was running a 1-2 home game, which for a broke college kid like me was like way too much money, but I mean, I played anyway, of course,
Yeah.
because why not?
Yes.
And long story short, I went in debt to the guy.
Okay.
And when I went in debt to him, the way that I paid him back was by basically working at the room, because the way that most rooms work, they go by seniority for the schedule. He
Hmm.
wanted to get his weekends off. So he didn't care about the money I owed him. He was like, but if you work here for 90 days, then I'll get my schedule. And I worked there for 90 days, learned how to deal. Really didn't like it at first because I
Uh-huh.
was I was dealing table games and not poker. And then
Hmm.
fast forward a few years later, I got back into it after some family stuff happened and
Hmm.
learned how to deal poker and just never left.
Okay. Wow. So this was a room, a poker room that you got the job from your friend.
Pretty much, yeah. I
Okay.
was they were looking for table games dealers, and
Okay.
uh, learning how to deal ultimate Texas Hold'em and Casino War, or one card as a lot of people call it, three card poker and Pai Gow. Those were the four games that I dealt back then,
Okay.
and pretty much that was all I dealt for like 3 months, and didn't really like the management style of what was going
Hmm.
on.
Hmm.
Um, but so I got out of it pretty quick, and that was also, I didn't know it at the time, but that room paid pretty poorly compared to other spots in Florida too.
Okay.
So once I got into it at a couple of different good spots, I started to see, okay, this is actually something that I could do for a while.
Cool. Cool. So Jeff, what were you studying at Florida State?
So initially, I was an economics major, and I switched over to international affairs, which Uh, I was originally going to be a teacher and a basketball coach. Now I'm just a basketball coach.
Okay.
And then after that, my other plan with that degree was to be an officer in the army. And some of my friends, I would say probably about 80% of people that are in my life know, but the other 20 don't. I
Mhm.
enlisted in the army in 2020, and I was medically chaptered out.
Okay.
So I had like a freak thing happen to me in basic, and I lost about 20 pounds. Couldn't even do a push up when I got out,
Hmm.
and I was in one of the probably the best shape of my life when I went in.
Okay.
So I just had a whole bunch of whole bunch of freak things happened, and I didn't
Mhm.
need my degree anymore, and I looked for something to do elsewhere.
Okay. So are you currently dealing right now?
I am.
Okay. Where you dealing at right now?
So I am dealing now at a small poker room in Indiana called the Terre Haute Casino Resort,
Okay.
which is in Terre Haute, Indiana. If you don't know where that is, if you think where Larry Bird went to college to play basketball, that's the same city.
Okay. Okay.
So I worked there, and then not too long ago, I started at a social club in Ohio as well that I
Mhm.
work at 2 days a week. So I floor at both places, and I deal.
Okay. Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
So Jeff, how because you're tall, because you're very tall. How tall are you? And does that give you an advantage at the table, like with your long arms? Does that
So,
help you?
so it actually does. I joke around with people all the time because it's probably one of the few times in my life that I actually see it as being a really strong advantage. But to answer your question, I'm 6'10".
Okay. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so
That's
it's been good for coaching, and it's been good for dealing, and that's really about it.
okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So Jeff, I want to get into like the testing of becoming a dealer. What do dealers have to do to get hired? Do they have to have a certificate? Do they have to have a license? And how do you go about getting that license
So
or
you
certificate?
you really couldn't have asked a better person for this.
Mhm.
There's a few different ways. There's usually the way that I did it is kind of unconventional in today's day and age.
Mhm.
I was a brush or a chip runner to start, and most places nowadays don't really have too many brushes or chip runners anymore. I mean, you have them at Hard Rock, and that's really the only place that I actively see chip runners anymore.
Mhm.
Um, so usually they'll get in that there, and then eventually some dealers are going to leave because it is a high turnover industry.
Mhm.
You have a lot of dealers that will flip flop to other places to go for the higher pay somewhere else. They'll go
Mhm.
out to the series for the summer and leave and just decide not to come back. I mean, a whole bunch of different things happen that way. But the way that I got into it was I was a chip runner, and eventually um, they needed dealers,
Mhm.
and so what some rooms will do is they'll either hold their own class, or they'll cover you to go to a dealing school.
Okay.
Now the dealing school technically isn't necessary.
Mhm.
There's no what's the right way to put it? There's no set requirements being a dealer other than showing you know how to deal. So we get jobs similar to how actors do. Um,
Okay.
and in terms of we have auditions, right?
Okay.
So like most people nowadays is they'll call a room up and they'll say, "Hey, I'm a poker dealer. I have my licensing. I have what I need to have here. When can you set up an audition?"
Mhm.
And if you have a previous work history, you and you're not a total scumbag, you can pretty much get an audition just about anywhere if they're hiring.
Okay.
Now, if you don't have any previous experience,
Mhm.
then you usually need to go to some type of dealing school, or
Mhm.
have a or know somebody that just basically knows you know what you're doing, and have the right person to talk to. And as long as you can prove it in the audition, you're fine.
Okay. So I want to be clear. So you don't need a license and you don't need a certificate. You just have to show up for the audition and show them that you can deal.
In order to get a job in Florida, where you and I are at, or where
Mhm.
I was at, I should say,
Mhm. Mhm.
and some other states, you have to have a gaming license. But all that a gaming license is it's essentially a background check that says you're not a thief.
Okay.
So you can't have any violent felonies on your record, and you can't have any misdemeanors or any type of convictions related to theft or fraud. If you
Okay.
have something that's nonsensical, like petty theft from when you were in college or something 5, 6 years ago, they're
Mhm.
probably not going to care. But if you have something that is uh, if you happen to have something that's serious, like mail fraud or something like that, you're not
Mhm.
going to be able to get a license. Now granted, if you're in a social club environment like in Ohio, or in Texas, like the Lodge is a social club, for example,
Mhm.
then that's just completely owner discretion.
Okay.
So there's no barrier. in that case.
Okay. Jeff, so if you don't mind me asking, how are poker dealers paid, or how are dealers paid?
So every dealer is paid differently depending on the house that they work at.
Okay.
So in Florida, the vast majority of places are paid tips and what they call tournament downs. And
Hmm.
so every down that you deal at pretty much every spot in Florida, other than Bonita Springs, is going to be 30 minutes.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. When I was working at One Eye Jacks, the way that they would pay the tournament downs out is you'll have dealer add-ons, which, like, say at the tournament, shout out to One Eye Jacks, by the way. Um, but if you have a 300 or 500 no rake buy-in, like they have on Fridays there,
Hmm.
and they have a $20 add-on, that add-on goes to the dealers. And the
Okay.
way that they determine that is, say, for example, there is $2,000 in tournament downs,
Hmm.
or in not in tournament downs. I'm sorry. There's $2,000 in add-ons,
Okay.
and you have 500 in tips at the end.
Hmm.
That'll be $2,500, and then you will divide that by the total number of dealer downs in the tournament, or every half hour that a dealer is at a table.
Okay.
So, say for example, there are just to make the math easy, say there's 250 downs, right?
Hmm.
That means you'll be getting paid $10 a down because you're taking the 2,500, dividing it by the 250,
Hmm.
so you'll get $10 a down, and
Okay.
that'll go on their paycheck, and then they also keep their tips in Florida. The one thing that Florida does differently that I didn't realize compared to pretty much everywhere else I've been is Florida tips out the floor staff. They do not do that in Indiana, and they don't do it in Ohio. So the dealers keep all of their own in Indiana and Ohio.
Okay.
But in most places in Florida, the tip out's about 10%.
So so the dealer have to to split. I mean, well, they take the 10% out of the dealer's tips,
Yeah.
and they pay the floor. Okay, they tip the floor with that.
Yeah, so the down rates for the dealers, they keep everything, but
Okay.
they get 10% of, in most places. I mean, every place is going to do it differently, and every house is going to be different. But
Mhm.
as a general rule of thumb, yeah, that's the case.
Now, with these dealing jobs, are there benefits available, uh, for like a 401k or investment program for you, or is it just you
So
kind of?
that also is going to be very house dependent. That's actually part of the reason that I left Florida, was because all of the small independent poker rooms in Florida, their pay is higher than you will get at other places.
Mhm.
However, the benefits are basically non-existent. You can get health insurance, and that's about it. And the health insurance that was offered to me at, and this is not a dig on Florida poker rooms in general, because I think that they are the best run as a whole
Mhm.
out of anybody else. So, like, I mean, I've worked at now 8 different houses,
Okay.
and I think that every place was slightly different, but I mean, where I'm working at now, I have a 401k match. I have medical benefits that are optional that I haven't taken because I don't really need them. And they have a
Okay.
whole bunch of, they have paid time off here amongst other things. Whereas back home, you don't work, you don't get paid.
Okay.
So they also have an attendance rule where it's a point system, and if you have a certain amount of points that you use up in a year, then you're fired.
Okay. Gotcha.
So it's the benefits are different depending on where you go. In Florida, the only place that I have heard of paying benefits is Hard Rock. I have not heard, and what I mean by benefits is like a 401k match, like tuition assistance and all of
Mhm.
that, because every
Okay.
place can give you medical.
Gotcha.
But yeah,
Okay. What's the most enjoyable thing you? What's the most enjoyable thing about dealing for you?
that's got to be the easiest question that I can answer.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't feel like I'm working when I'm at work. It's I'm pitching out cards, doing something that I enjoy, and I know I'm never going to get filthy rich doing it,
Mhm.
but it's able to put a roof over my head, and the people that you're surrounding yourself with are people that share the same hobby as you. So as long as if you have a passion for it, I think it's a great field to get into. However, if you don't have a passion for it and you're just trying to make money, you're going to burn out in 5 years.
Okay,
You got to enjoy what you do to be a dealer long term.
gotcha. Um, what's the most challenging thing about being a dealer?
Keeping your mouth shut at the table when players are acting like idiots.
Gotcha.
And I have one too many. I'm gonna give you one story of when I was working at Derby Lane.
Okay.
It's probably I don't know how I didn't get in more trouble for this, but I was dealing do you remember when the Bud Light controversy was going on? So there was like there was a trans model that was modeling for Bud Light, and a whole
Okay.
bunch of people hated it, and they're like, "Oh, Bud Light's gone woke." They were doing all of that. Well, there was a guy that was at my table at Derby that was not only to me but to the previous dealer was acting like an ass, wasn't tipping at all.
Hmm.
Which is again like tipping. I don't care if you do it or not, but don't
Hmm.
like make it a point to not tip or just be consistently miserable at the same time.
Yeah.
The guy lost three big all ins, and he got sucked out on two of them
Hmm.
as poker swings go. And he decided to be a smartass with me and make a couple of backhanded comments. And then he was also talking smack to the guy that knocked him out that ordered a Bud Light.
Hmm.
And he was calling him a sissy, this, that, and the other, and got mad at him. And the other guy wasn't really sticking up for himself, wasn't saying anything. And I get up from the table and he made a couple of backhanded comments to me as I leave. So I walk over to the waitress and I say, "Hey, send seat 5 a pitcher of Bud Light." And I'm walking into my next table, and I have a big shit-eating grin on my face, and the players are like, "You seem happy," and I was just held up a hand like this. I go 5, 4, 3, and as soon as I hit 2, I just hear, "I didn't order no fucking Bud Light," and that's probably it's easily top 5 one of my favorite memories of dealing. And the guy actually about a week later thought it was hilarious, but
Yeah.
at the time, being down the money that he was down, he was pissed off. But he realized he was being a bit of a jerk in the moment.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah,
So you had them send him a Bud Light. That's funny.
yeah. I did have to pay for it, but I was completely fine with that for the humor in it.
That's awesome. It's well worth it. It's
Oh,
well worth it.
absolutely.
Being a dealer and being around players, um, are you okay, this question is, are you able to play at the casinos you deal with? Because I know in Florida, you're not allowed to play at the casinos that you deal at.
So yeah, so Florida's has a law in place where you're not allowed to play where you work. In
Okay.
Indiana, Indiana is probably the only place in the country that I have seen as strict as it is.
Hmm.
There's no playing in the casinos. Some places you're not even allowed to eat where you
Oh
deal.
wow.
It's like I mean, not
We're having technical difficulties here. Let me see here. Okay,
there
there
we
you
go.
go. There you go. But can you hear me?
Can you hear me, man?
Yep, I can hear you.
I can't hear you at all.
You can't hear me? Um, let me
Let me see
see
here.
here. I can hear you perfectly fine. You can't hear me? No. Let me see. What I'm going to do, I'm going to remove you and add you back. Okay.
What about
Can
now?
you hear me?
Nah, I can't hear
Can you
you at
hear me?
all, man.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna remove you and add you back.
Let me see here.
What about now? Can you hear me now?
Nah, hold on one sec. What about now?
Can you,
There we
I can
go.
hear you. Can
Okay.
you hear me?
Yeah, I got you back.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Okay. Cool. 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 So Indiana does not allow you to play at the casino you deal at.
No, so they're really strict about everything here. Like you're not allowed to socialize after work either. Like you can't. You can't grab a drink at the bar with friends. Like at One Eyed Jacks, I mean, half the time that we'd get off, and shout out to the Collins family too. They were an amazing family. Absolutely loved working for them.
Hmm.
I mean, Jack and Chris, like you could have a bourbon with them at the bar after work, no problem.
Nice.
But in Indiana, you're not allowed to. If you have even a slight sip of alcohol before you go into, you could have a beer before work. They test you, and you blow even a .0001, you're fired.
Wow. Wow.
It's crazy strict here compared to everywhere else.
Yeah.
But then you go across into Ohio and you play in a club environment.
Hmm.
On a club, you can be dealing, and then depending on whatever their house rules are, because it's a club and it's not like governed by a gaming board, you can play PLO after you get off work. I mean, the amount of times that I've seen people take their tips and just sit down at a PLO table with the tips they made for the night.
Wow. That's
I
pretty
mean,
cool though.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
that was how it was when I worked out in Vegas too. Is
Okay.
they would have this. They used to have a playlist where the room would actually stake you to play, as
Oh
long
wow.
as you weren't bluffing all your money away.
Wow.
But those days are kind of behind most places. Nowadays, it's you risk your own money and they pay you your base wage to keep the game
Mhm.
going, essentially.
So how long have you been dealing?
So I started in 2019 with table games, and with poker, I dealt some home games in 2021, back and forth a little bit, but I really got into like poker and poker rooms and casinos in Florida in
Hmm.
2022.
Hmm. I see a lot of dealers. They do deal home games when they're not working. Is it very profitable to deal the home games compared to working at a club or at a poker room or casino?
So it kind of has to be in order to be worth it for dealers. I I will not name names,
Yes.
um, because depending on the game, they can get in trouble. Obviously, if they're taking a rake or not.
Okay.
Which I mean, if the game is running,
Yeah.
there's a rake, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it would have to be profitable, like substantially more, just because in so Florida's different than Indiana in this way as well. Florida, you're not really going to get rated as a game unless you're doing something illegal while you're
Mhm.
doing something illegal, right? So
Yeah.
like, so the way that home games in Florida will get in trouble is there will be drugs somewhere at the game, or a player will have them, or if you get into the higher stakes games, sometimes there will be girls,
Hmm.
and not ones that are not paid. If you catch my drift.
Yeah, I got
Um,
you.
yeah. So as long as there's nothing else shady going on, or if they're
Uh-huh.
running a sports book there as well, but that's kind of been eliminated since Hard Rock got legalized in Florida.
Yes.
Um, you're pretty much going to be okay for the most part. So
Hmm.
in Florida, you don't really need to have to get paid significantly more. Now in
Hmm.
Indiana, we had a 1-3 game get rated.
Oh wow. At home game?
Yeah, the
Wow.
Indiana Gaming Commission does not play. Like
Wow.
they had some crooked nonsense going on up here long before I got here.
Hmm.
They had one of the casinos. I'll have to ask my boss which one it was. It was the one that he worked at, near Gary, Indiana.
Hmm.
Uh, they actually had 8 of their 10 executives got sent to federal prison for bribery
Wow.
because they were bribing one of the political candidates for office in the state of Indiana. I don't remember if it was a state senator or what it, or if it was a rep or what it was, but
Uh-huh.
basically they were funneling a whole bunch of money into their campaign in order to soften gaming regulations.
Wow. Wow. Well, that
So I mean,
makes that makes
there's
sense. That makes sense. I think that goes on
yeah.
more than we think. You know what I mean?
Oh, it
Uh,
definitely does. That's the
yeah.
one thing that I
Yeah.
that I started to realize about the industry is, some people think you have a tinfoil hat when you're talking about corruption and conspiracy and all that. No,
Yeah.
I mean the level of they say that if there's a system in place, someone's going to take advantage of it or try to use it to their advantage.
Hmm.
Gaming is definitely not an exception to that rule. I mean,
Hmm.
the amount of theft and stories that people
Hmm.
have seen and heard, with whether it comes down to Florida, whether it's, I mean, especially Vegas
Hmm.
or anywhere else, that's part of the reason why I was so in favor of regulating everything, is to make sure
Mhm,
that people are actually enjoying a hobby the right way and not
mhm,
taking advantage of unsuspecting people.
mhm. So you said now you also floor also
I
along
do.
with Dylan,
I do, yes.
and I want to get into the topic of the actual jackpot money.
Okay.
Does does that jackpot money get paid out all of it, or does the casino take some of that money?
All right.
Yeah,
So this is going to be something that is kind of, I'm actually really glad you asked that.
yeah.
So what is legally written in Florida is there is a percentage threshold that has to be paid, that legally has to be paid out to the players
Hmm.
by a certain time frame of every year.
Okay,
Now, the last I worked in Florida, that threshold was 90%.
okay,
So if you have $100,000 in the jackpot fund, you have to legally pay 90,000 of that out by the end of the year.
okay,
So if you start to see promotions around October, November, December of crazy high hands, and you're like, how the hell are they affording this? Players have already paid into it, and they need to get rid of that money.
okay,
Now, granted, there have been scandals of people stealing promo money,
okay,
and the only people that have access to promo money are floors.
okay,
So I'm not going to say the room, but there was a room um, in Florida
okay,
about 3 or 4 years ago where they would have a promotion for high hands, and a one card high hand would pay out $150,
okay.
and a two card high hand would pay out $300. Well, anytime that there was a one card high hand, what a guy would do is he would lie and say it was 200, or that it was a two card high hand rather, and he'd pocket the other $150.
Wow.
So if you have a room that's got, say there's only 7 or 8 tables going on, and your minimum qualifier is quads, but you
Hmm.
have 7 or 8 full tables going,
Hmm.
there is absolutely zero reason that you're not going to have at least 5 or 6 by the end of your shift that are one card high hands.
Hmm.
So even if like 3 of them are one carders, and
Hmm.
he just wanted to do two that day, that he would lie and say are two. It's an extra $300 that he's just putting in his pocket at the end of the night.
Wow.
And eventually, the way that he got caught was the money got to be around, like, it was something north of six, like slightly north of 6 figures that he stole in a
Wow.
1 year period. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So the way he got caught was basically, they're like, how are there no one card high hands in this? And when they went back and checked the records of everything,
Hmm.
he got way too greedy, and basically, lied about the cards, or about the number of cards for the high hand. And when they ran the math on it to see if it made mathematical sense, it made absolutely zero mathematical sense. So they knew it was theft. And then they went back to check the shifts to see which shifts it happened on, and it was only his shifts.
Wow. Wow.
And that room uh, had a very significant change in management.
Hmm.
And not only did that room have a change in management, but his girlfriend was actually a higher up for one of the table games companies that works in Florida as well, at the independent card rooms.
Wow.
So everything is connected. Um, I've always been amazed at the levels that some people will get with their greed,
Yeah.
and that is definitely one that is icing on the cake.
It just seems like everybody get caught because they get too greedy. It seems
It's
like they can.
it's it's no different than
Yeah.
over bluffing in a pot. It's no
Yeah.
different than that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just you're lying, saying that something is happening that's not happening, and then eventually someone's going to see it, and you're going to get caught.
I like the way you bring. Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Let's transition to talking about a little bit about uh your playing. Do you rather play or do you rather deal? What side of the table would you rather be on, and why?
Depends where I'm playing and depends where I'm dealing.
Okay.
Um, I think that For me, an enjoyable table doesn't come with the action that's at the table. It comes with the people that I'm playing with.
Okay.
So I'm not the typical poker player that's like looking for an EV play every single time.
Hmm.
I like the aspect of the game that messes with people's heads. I like the
Hmm.
psychological part of poker.
Okay.
I like being able to look at someone and like for example, I was playing cards about 2 months ago um, at it was a tournament, like a cheap little tournament. It was like a $60 buy-in, and it was just with some friends after work.
Hmm.
One guy was taking it way too seriously,
Hmm.
like way too seriously, and was like going like this at me, looking for tells, and eventually like staring at me with like huge eyes. I just stared at him back. Like it's a $60 tournament. Have some fun, loosen up, have a couple of
Yeah.
beers. Like that's what it's for.
Yeah.
The and that's the other thing I want people to realize too is these tournaments in especially in Florida where you're buying in for 50, 60, $70, they're raked to living hell. You're never going to come out on top long term. I don't care how good of a player you are.
Hmm.
I mean, when you have tournaments that are raked at 20, 30%, you're never going to come out on top.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
That's a
sit
lot.
back, have a good time, have a few beers. That's what those tournaments are for. You want to
Right.
play in the tournaments where you're going to make money, play in your low or no rake tournaments. But getting back to what you were saying on if I'd rather play or deal,
Mm.
I really enjoy both equally, I think.
Okay.
Um, I think that the longer that I go into my shift, the more I'd say I want to play.
Okay.
But I also think that um, dealing, it also depends on who I'm dealing to. Like, if
Hmm.
I'm dealing to a good group of people, like a good group of regulars that I know everybody and I know them all on a first name basis. Like, if I was working at One Eye Jacks or where I work now in Terre Haute and I know everybody, I would much rather deal.
Gotcha.
Um, but if it's people that I don't really know very well
Hmm.
and they start to kind of make my job feel like a job,
Hmm.
which I know is a really privileged thing to say.
Yeah.
But if I start to feel like my work is really starting to become work, I would rather play.
And that comes with people complaining or just berating the dealer, or that's those are the type of things that kind of.
So that's one thing that's a blessing and a curse for me is I feel like with dealers, the better they're able to control the game and the more they're able to run the game and the players respect their ability to deal, the less that's going to happen to them. You're always going to get your idiots. Like I've
Mhm.
had a couple of chips thrown at me before. I've had cards thrown at me before. I
Mhm.
had one guy tell me he'll see me outside. Like it happens. You're going to have people
Yeah.
that are going to get angry with you, whether it's because they're drunk, whether it's because they lost a lot of money, whether it's because they just don't like you. I mean, there's going to be people that are going to be upset with you.
Gotcha.
I I mean, you just it's just part of the job, but it does if you work with a group of regulars though, that happens a lot less frequently.
True. True.
Like at One Eye Jacks, I worked there for 2 years. I had seen 3 physical fights in 2 years. In a poker
Hmm.
room, that's unheard of. And I work nights. I mean,
Wow.
I worked at the time when like alcohol is flowing and the money is
Uh huh.
going back and forth with everybody. I saw 3 fights the
Wow.
entire time.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to get a better crowd than a room that's got mostly regulars.
Cool. You being a dealer and you're being around the game so much,
Mhm.
do you think that gives you an advantage when you're actually playing?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll be sitting here. Yeah, so that's actually another funny story that I can give you. I was dealing about oh, it was about a year and a half ago. It was right before I left One Eye Jacks to go to Vegas and deal. Um, there was a big hand in a tournament, and I put the guy on exactly what he had.
Mm.
And I called out the guy's hand before he tabled it
Hmm.
when a guy called him on the river.
Wow.
And he was like, "Did I flash my cards?" And I looked at him and I was like, I kind of had to play it off. And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay."
Yeah.
Well, the one seat was a good buddy of mine. And the one seat comes up to me when I push. He's like, he didn't flash his cards, did he? And I was like, you better not snitch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've definitely seen hands, and I've known exactly what a player's had in the past. I've also seen some hands, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to always be right, but I think the thing that dealers pick up on the most is physical tells that we're able to see.
Okay.
It's not so much because I mean, you get lost when you're doing your job and what the actual action is.
Hmm.
Like I'm not going to be able to tell you on the river usually, unless it's PLO. But if it's
Hmm.
Hold'em, I'm not going to tell you who three or four bet who.
Okay.
You know. But if it's PLO and I have to keep track of the pot, kind of makes it a little bit easier.
Hmm. You know what I want to ask you about PLO, and
Yeah.
I've been playing PLO for this for almost the last year. I transitioned to PLO, and to me, it seems like a lot of dealers have trouble keeping track of the pot in the game
Oh
of pot
God.
limit Omaha.
You are going to
It's
get
it
me on a. You're going to get me on a soapbox, Manny.
Yeah, it kind of it's kind of it gets annoying a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they're not sure, what the pot is when you ask them the pot. And I actually told the floor at Hard Rock, I said, hey, I think you just need to just run all your poker dealers through a refresher course in PLO, just to give them the basics. You know what I mean? Because it makes a really big difference whether the pot is 275 and 375. That's a big $100 difference, and it seems like to me that a lot of dealers have trouble dealing the game of pot limit Omaha. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Oh man, I have too many thoughts on that. So the first thing that I will say is I also need to give a very big shout out to a friend of mine, David Hall, who runs Rockstar Dealing Academy out
Hmm.
of Florida. I opened his branch in Indianapolis, and unfortunately, we have not had a lot of clients.
Hmm.
So we haven't gotten a class running yet.
Okay.
However, uh, he can attest to this as well. The quality of dealers since the early 2000s, when poker really boomed, the quality of them has just gone significantly downhill. And it has nothing to do with the education of the dealers. The education isn't changing, but the
Hmm.
standard of what rooms are accepting is changing.
Okay. Gotcha.
So when you can't keep the average turnaround for a dealer in Florida is about 8 months.
Okay.
So when you have that quick of a turnover with dealers, you're not going to keep the best of the best. The
Hmm.
reason why places like Aria, where I worked in Vegas, the Win, Resorts World, um, some of the bigger casinos that are genuinely the best in the business. The reason that they keep employees is because of how they treat their employees, as well as the benefits packages that other companies just do not offer.
Okay.
And if you can't keep quality dealers,
Hmm.
you're not going to have quality games. And that's what I wish people would understand with it. And the reason why is just because the standard of what rooms are accepting has gone downhill. I mean, at the end of the day, if a room is going to pass you, like we're going to pass you to be able to go on to another room as long as we know that rooms are accepting these standards. But
Hmm.
if you can't keep good dealers, they have to replace them.
Hmm.
And if that quality goes down because of how rooms are treating them, that's out of our hands, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but the training hasn't changed. I mean, the only thing that I think is a really big difference now as opposed to now, granted, obviously I wasn't in the industry 15, 20 years ago, but
Hmm.
from what I understand, the biggest difference is the pitch, right? Like it used to be you have to pitch a specific way. You have to have zero wrist movement and you have to only use your fingers. You have to
Hmm.
shuffle, box shuffle, and pitch cards to or pitch all of the first 18 cards for Hold'em and do that in under 20 seconds. You don't do that, you're not hired.
Okay.
Nowadays, frankly, if you've played at the WSOP in the last 3 years, you know.
Hmm.
I mean, if you can breathe, they'll put you in the box.
Okay.
It's just there's no standard, and it's really unfortunate because that has caused dealer pay to kind of stifle.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, if you go back to like 2006, 7, and 8, when limit poker was still popular in poker rooms,
Mm-hmm.
dealers were making bank. And I mean, don't get me wrong, we still do fine for ourselves now.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we're making basically slightly less money than we were in 2007 or 8.
Okay.
That's a very, very big difference into when you factor in inflation and everything like that. But I mean, the PLO aspect of it, I just think that they're just not training enough.
Okay.
Like, if you're not good at it, don't put them in the box for that game.
Mm-hmm.
But then also how rooms are run nowadays, I'm sure you've seen, like, if you look on Bravo and you'll see numbers on a board, it'll say like 9, 11, 17, and then a B.
Mm-hmm.
That's the order of tables the dealers go in.
Okay.
So if they go to table 9, next table's 11, then 17, then B stands for break.
Okay.
Well, most rooms nowadays are a full room push, meaning they deal every table.
Okay.
But if you can't deal that game, all you're going to do is piss the players off that are there.
I'm telling you, man.
You know how many times that I would get into a PLO game and all I would do is shuffle. I
Yeah.
kid you not. That
Yeah.
all this happened to me a couple of days ago. All I would do was shuffle, and then I would pitch the cards out. And someone would ask me, "How long you been dealing?" I'll tell them 5 years, and
Yeah.
they'll look at me and say, "Thank God."
Yeah.
I mean,
It's amazing, bro.
the
I
biggest
mean,
the biggest thing
yeah.
isn't even PLO, it's the bomb pots that are getting all the dealers nowadays because they're not
Yeah.
understanding like the split pot mechanics of it.
Yeah.
Like, you'll see dealers nowadays that are stacking the pots in a double board PLO game. You're not supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And even a lot of floors don't even know that.
Okay.
But you only stack a pot in a split pot game. And double board PLO, just because there's two boards doesn't mean it's split pot.
Okay.
It's just two boards. So
Okay.
a split pot game would be like PLO high low.
High low. Okay. Got
And that's when you would do that. And there's even some mechanics with high low that people don't do. I mean, I've dealt pretty much every game that there is to deal that's
you. Mm-hmm.
dealt in a casino. And there's always going to be some slightly different variation of a way that someone wants to do things.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you have the baseline down, you're okay. Like, you can learn the very basic intricate things. Like, for example, in a 1-2 with a $5 bring in PLO game, right? You're supposed to straddle to $10.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the places that I've worked recently, it's a $5 straddle. And I'm
Okay.
sitting here like, well, if the button can just call for 5 anyway, you're giving them an unfair advantage by
Yeah.
allowing them to start. I was like, this doesn't make sense. It's like, if they're
Yeah.
going to straddle, make them make it double what the bring in would be.
Yes. Yes.
But everywhere is different. Um, I wish that more things would become uniform so that players aren't so confused when they go from house to house.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the reason why we have the TDA for the Tournament Directors Association,
Gotcha.
is because they're able to print rules every year. If a room says they go by TDA, there's no
Mm-hmm.
arguing.
Okay.
I just wish the cash would have something that was similar.
Okay. I know we've been talking for a while, man,
Yeah,
and I appreciate your time, man.
yeah,
And I'm learning a lot of insight that I just was wondering in my head about Dylan in the background of the jackpot, man. I really thank you for your time. I'm
yeah.
gonna talk to you. I'm gonna ask you. Um, oh, I'm gonna ask you a question. Just give me the first thing that comes to your mind when I say this word.
Sure.
One eye jacks.
Great people.
Great people. Awesome. Derby Lane.
HR can pound sand.
Okay. Home games.
Be careful who you play with.
Tournaments.
Cut the rake.
Okay, all right. Cool, cool, cool. All right, Jeff, man. Thank you for your time, man. I really do appreciate you taking time out your day. And I will be sending you a shirt and some socks, a Gamble Quest shirt and some socks. If you can just text me your address,
Yeah.
and I'll make sure I send that out this week. And man, thank you for your time, man, once again. And I gotta bring you back on because there's a lot more other questions I want to ask you.
Heck yeah.
About the rules and how come we can't get everybody on the same page in the poker room. But we could talk all day about this. But I know you got stuff to do, and I ain't gonna take too much of your time. I really do appreciate it, bro. Thank you.
Yeah, man, of course.